Hello, everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco Documentary Film Festival. My name is Lucy Hanna. I'm one of the programmers here, and I'm excited today to have Chris de la Cruz, and the director and the filmmaker for a very special film that we have. It's a film about tiny hearts, and that's what the name of the film is. It's about the tiny hearts, and it's for the tiny hearts. Um, um, a, um, a humane mission, a doctor that dedicated his life into saving children um, everywhere where healthcare, proper healthcare, is not something feasible in countries that under conflict, under occupation, or continuous wars and unrest. And he dedicated his life, despite of everything, into having a cause to deliver and not having the time, like he says in the film, to try and show it off or say it. So Chris thought maybe I do. And that's how the film, I think, started happening. Welcome. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, thank you to you and all the programmers and everyone at SF DocFest for watching our film and giving us a chance. And we're just grateful to have this opportunity to share this moment and to share this film with your audience because we honestly believe, we wouldn't have committed the last half decade or so to following through with this story and completing it if we didn't think that it could have a tremendous impact on, not just on the communities, but on the world. So thank you. And this is meaningful too, because I'm from San Francisco, born and raised, went to Archbishop Riordan High School, University of San Francisco, I went to college. And, I developed my filmmaking chops out there. And I'm here in Los Angeles for now, 17 years. So it's very symbolic and very meaningful. So I just want to thank you guys.
Thank you again. It was a great film to watch. And I love films that have a message. And I am always impressed by people and that don't care about anything other than their cause, which I think the film is highlighting the life and the struggles, not just the mission of a very, um, let me say, a very honorable doctor that is becoming a healer uh, to the tiny hearts of the children. Let's start by how did you get introduced to the mission itself, uh, to
Yeah,
Dr. Holbrook?
sure. Well, yeah, this started back in 2019. One of my creative collaborators, Philip Lawrence, he's an eight-time Grammy Award winning songwriter and producer, has done a lot of stuff with Bruno Mars. I've been his creative collaborator for a while, and I was introduced to Dr. Novik through him. And it was just a random brunch that we had here in Los Angeles. I didn't actually know who I was meeting, but my partner was telling me that, hey, you got to meet this guy. There was a few articles maybe that I'd maybe seen. There was an article on Men's Journal. I read it, I scanned it actually as I was driving to the brunch to meet him. And what stood out was he was out into war zones and conflict zones, operating on kids born with congenital heart defects. And you know that obviously stuck out. Here's sort of like the prototypical hero that us as filmmakers and storytellers try to basically look for. So we felt like this was a great opportunity to just meet him because we felt like we don't meet people like this often. And so when we had this meeting, he started talking about his stories and operating on kids while bombs are falling outside, and just the way he was speaking in his presence felt like I was listening to an audiobook. And it was just so captivating, and the stories were just so gripping. And and so as he was saying this in my head, I'm thinking to myself, how can we work with this man? And sure enough, I asked him if he had any content or material or marketing material that you know, that he's putting out there. And he bluntly just told me that, we're too busy fucking saving lives. So, we don't have time, Chris, to do marketing videos and all that sorts of stuff. And so I just listen. I think this is how it actually first started. Um, I asked him if he can spare like an hour or two, and I told him I could bring my cinematographer. It could just be a very small thing, and he committed to it. And the next day, and it's hard. This guy is literally gone 300 days out of the year. So the following day, we ended up filming. We brought our camera, and instead of 1 or 2 hours, like we sat for like 3 or 4 hours, and he just basically talked about this whole entire thing. And a week later, I put something together. He called me and said, "Hey, listen, Chris, there was a story that I told you about. Back in 1999, there was a Serbian child, 10 days old, on an operating table. Bombs were falling outside. We saved this child. Literally, bombs were falling outside with his chest open. They were able to save this child. The mother found him 20 plus years later or whatnot, and asked if they can do a reunion. And he threw out the offer and invited me to see if I'd be interested in coming with him. And before he could even finish his sentence, I said, "Yes, I'm there. I want to do this." And so that's how this whole process actually started. What was originally going to be a marketing video for him actually ended up evolving into, you know,
6 years of work and then
6 years
actually a
of.
very sentimental film. Those 2 hours turned into 6 years, and here we are. We have a film. And I said thank you actually for explaining how you opened the film because I was like, wow. When I first watched the film, I was like, oh, wow, look at this guy now. Uh,
Yeah,
that you opened the film with, obviously, which was a very smart choice. As much as the documentary filmmaking process is actually a fluid process, and somehow you have to trust the unknown, something good comes out of it, right? You just keep filming thousands of hours, and then you get a lot of content, and probably you film the film took you 6 years to make, maybe took you another six to edit, but I didn't think it was that long, but I'm sure you've had a lot of footage. Speaking of Dr. Novak himself,
yeah,
he is a very charismatic person. And what I liked about the film is that he has humor and he has pain. And you made sure also to show his vulnerabilities, maybe towards the end. You were focused throughout the film on his mission and also the people around him, not just, it wasn't a one-man show. They spoke of their struggles and but also I think it was a very intriguing choice to put that towards the end where we know now his not the very end, but I mean like this the third act, uh, that he has his own pain too, right? If you can speak
yeah,
of how did you manage to keep the tone
yeah.
of the film without having the scales dipping in the wrong direction when you were going there in the human part of it? How did you balance?
That's an excellent question. I was trying to figure that out for like the first 2 years of that process, honestly. And for those that don't know, Dr. Novick was actually in a documentary that won an Oscar back in 2000, 2001. It was called Chernobyl Hearts, and he was one of the key figures in that documentary. And in that documentary, he actually showed his vulnerability because I think there's this stigma with surgeons. They come across, very,
Tough. Mhm.
tough, intimidating. They lead with their, fist on the table. And Dr. Novick he shares those similar traits, and he's been in a few other documentaries. The one thing that I told him was, listen, I've seen your other documentaries, Dr. Novick, and they're all clinical. The one, and I referenced the documentary where he actually won the Oscar, and I said that's one of the very few moments where we actually see you vulnerable. And I said, and I told him that I want to commit to this project, but I think the only way to do this is for you to show your vulnerable side. I think people can um, they can connect to, they'll read the stories about heroism and, these people doing incredible things. But as you and I know, like in this age of information, those feelings are very fleeting. They last for a day and then everyone goes back to their normal selves. And I think the idea here was how can we actually show the human side, um, diving more into like the cerebral component of what goes on, inside the mind of a heart surgeon who sacrifices, a lot of, he's been sacrificing for over 30 years, specifically with his family, sacrificing his own health issues, and putting forth, it's ultimately, obviously, it's the most, unselfish act that any person can do. And so, there's so many layers to this, Lucy, because number one, we wanted to figure out ways to, integrate, the advocacy of what he's doing, but we didn't want to make it, obviously a marketing or promo video in that regard. And so I think that's why we wanted to really have this sort of like multi-layered approach where, yes, we're focused on the external conflicts, which are these war zones. But then as you sort of like go deeper into these layers, you get into the hospital, right? The hospital in itself has its own conflicts internally. And then when you go in deeper, the people that actually are working in these hospitals, there's a, internal conflict with the characters. And so I think that was sort of like the three-tier approach that I wanted to sort of um, structure this documentary in. And ultimately at the heart of this film is really, Dr. Novick, trying to get to this point of like, okay, well, what motivates him? Like, what really causes him to, figure out ways to, I think that's a question that a lot of people have asked me, which is, how can a man for 30 years keep doing this? Because they just think that it's like you need some sort of superhuman power. And I think that's the reason why I was more intrigued with that aspect, Lucy, which was, how do I get Dr. Novick to, open up a little bit and get into the family dynamics? Obviously you saw his wife in there and, her own struggles of dealing with her husband, going into these conflict zones. And then obviously the people around Dr. Novick and how they're just an extension of who he is. So yeah, sorry, this was a very long-winded response. It's hard to compartmentalize all these different things because you're talking about 30 years of commitment that these guys have done, and obviously Dr. Novick has committed his life to this. So I think that was one of the challenges, obviously, of putting it into, 100-minute documentary. I think I could have made this even longer. I don't think that would have been smart, but I think it would have we just wanted to give, um, a glimpse of it, of what Dr. Novick goes through, because I think as long as audiences feel what it feels like to be in the trenches with this man and what he goes through, then that's all I wanted to do.
I really like that you added that. I think that was a crucial part of not turning this into a PR piece.
Yeah.
You put the human factor in it, and you put it in the smartest possible way. And it's good that Dr. Norbeck allowed you to do that. And not everyone is easy about being vulnerable and showing you their personal space. And but it's very important also. Sometimes when films focus on the mission than the person, I feel like how can I connect with a person? I want to connect with the person too. And that's an integral part of filmmaking, or it turns into a PR piece, like you're promoting now something, than an actual cinematic experience that the emotion um, is a big part of it. Uh, Speaking of filming for 6 years and going like everywhere in those very dangerous places, of course there it comes risks with that. If you can speak of what happened to you guys throughout that process, I'm sure you've been through a thing or two, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, lightly put. a thing or two. Yeah, you go through a spiritual transformation. There's no other way for me to put it. I mean, I had to write a book about this whole process. I needed that catharsis because there was just so much experience in that in those 5 6 years that I went through. Like I couldn't just keep that in my heart or in my mind. I needed to let that go. But yeah, I think building a new relationship to what I thought fear was the first step. Because when the doctor says, "Listen, this is you're the filmmaker, Chris. You could do whatever you want. I'll be vulnerable. Whatever it is that you want. The only prerequisite here is you're going to have to come with me into these conflict zones." And I think the first step was really just trying to understand and figure out within me, um, you know, what that is, because I think there's this common notion that as filmmakers, we're the ones that have the power to tell whatever story it is that we want. I think I don't think that's right. I think that's wrong. Like I don't believe in that anymore. What I do believe in now is that I do believe that there are certain stories that find you, the individual. And so I think for me, it was really just aligning myself with my higher, consciousness, so to speak, like understanding, okay, well, why did I decide to get into filmmaking in the first place? And I think that's where this really just started, really the core, which was, I could spend the rest of my career not finding a person like this to tell a story on. And I didn't want to have that regret, honestly. And so I think the first step was really just kind of overcoming that fear. And as my wife told me, you know, um, being, fearful is the same thing as praying in many ways, right? Like if you're gonna keep focusing on the negativity, then you're going to attract those things and manifest those things into your life. So
Yeah.
the way at least I kind of approached it was everything was going to be fine as long as I'm leading with my heart and I'm doing the right thing. Danger, regardless of where I'm at, is not going to be able to impact or affect me. And the doctor wasn't going to put us in that situation to begin with. And I know, listen, I think we phrase it as that, like we're going into war zones. And yes, there are risks. Nothing is guaranteed in terms of safety. But we're working with handlers, directly with the hospital. We don't have like military people that are coming with us, because I've been asked that many times. Oh, do you guys have like people with,
Private security,
private
bodyguards, yeah.
private security? No, we don't. And the beauty of this, Lucy, is like, there are volunteers that are coming from all over the world. And so we're all meeting up at the airports together, and we're all, jumping into our vehicles and vans or whatnot. So we're all experiencing this together. And so for some, at least for me and my cinematographer, Jason, who was brave enough to come with me into these places, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think it's placing your faith in the process and knowing that these, Dr. Novick and his team have done this for, decades. And so I think that's where it really began. But yeah, it's not easy, obviously, because, for example, when we're in Ukraine, um, that's when the war first broke out between Russia and Ukraine. And so we're hearing constant air raid sirens going off, and it's very uneasy because, as I was told by one of the Ukrainian parents, when the sirens go off, the missiles are already in the air, and you don't even know where they're going to land. They showed us an app, Lucy, where it's like, oh, they told us to download this app, and it'll give us a sort of a map, a region where it shows like red is the highly, you know, likely place where these missiles are going to strike.
Wow.
And
I
it
didn't know
was
such a thing exists, actually.
and I didn't either. And what was comical, but almost like because you can't do anything because like we're looking at the app, and I'm like, okay, well, the whole country is red. Like, there's no area on this map where it's not red. So at this point, and it's interesting because I think at that stage people just got used to the air raid sirens, and from what I was told, um, initially people would go into their bunkers, but at some point they just said, screw it, like they're not gonna let they would not let fear dictate how they wanted to live their life, which I thought was really powerful, and I think that was also a constant theme throughout this whole entire journey, dealing with the parents and or whatnot, and I think that's what it was, Lucy, is that when you're in the hospital and once you're filming and once you're documenting and telling these stories, the external conflict becomes less, it becomes dimmed down. Like you don't
Yeah.
even pay attention to it because you just get so locked in into the internal conflicts of the actual people that are going through, whatever pain that they're and suffering that they're experiencing, like these parents. Like a father that when I was in Lebanon, we're literally minutes away from the Syrian border, and I'm talking to a Syrian refugee father, and as I'm asking him these questions through this interpreter, you could just see like his eyes well up. And he told my interpreter that all he could think about right now was, his son and whether or not he was going to survive. So it's one of those things like you start to connect with the people there, you build empathy, and you just forget what's around you. Like you just forget that you're actually in a war zone and you become so consumed by, the people and the stories that you're obviously trying to document and tell their stories.
And speaking of that, actually, Chris, I know it becomes a background noise, what
Yeah.
happens around you when you have a higher mission. And uh, uh, we always get asked when we grew up in countries that had conflict in them, how do you guys manage to live? Because we only see the news part, but there are ways that you somehow normalize that the chaos and danger, and somehow you manage to live. And I feel also there was let's say an underlying message in your film. It's a call for survival under very extreme, extraordinary conditions. These people not giving up on their children and still trying to fight and exist in life and give them a heart that works so they can, you know, continue living, even though it's so the small side. But if we can just like concede and, and surrender to whatever that, let's say the bad fate, uh, nothing will come out of it. The life ends, and that's why one of the main things that we have as instinctually as human beings is the survival. When danger comes, that you just like the reflex action tries to protect you because survival is this is your first mission as a human being to continue living. And I felt that through
Yeah.
the message, not just the message of the doctor and his mission, but also the people that still, despite everything, despite their living conditions, still believe in life and want life, even if it's not gonna be like smooth, but they still want to live. And have you gotten the chance to show your film to the people that were part of your film?
Yeah, so yeah, we the entire Global Cardiac Alliance, the nurses and doctors that were featured in the documentary, they have seen it. A few of the parents that were documented on there, specifically the one in Ukraine, and a few others, they have seen it, and they didn't, I don't think they knew what this would turn out to be. And I think it was just one of those situations where when they did finally see it, it was just um, I think first of all, I think it was just amazement that and it's just not me. I think it was just sort of like this broader general idea that um, just with a couple of cameras, you can actually put together a pretty significant documentary and film in this fashion. So I think that was first and foremost. But I think everyone who has seen it has just been incredibly touched, um, on multiple levels. We
But
had
the
one of the,
doctor, well, how did he feel when he saw himself in that film?
oh my gosh, I think,
I know he doesn't like that kind of attention, but
Yeah, the doctor when we had like when we were close to the final cut of the film, we did have he flew out here to Los Angeles. We did the screening, and he was choked up, and I kind of wanted to get that from him during the process, but and because originally my thought with vulnerability was, oh, maybe he needs to cry and he needs to like just let go. But I realized vulnerability isn't just that, like just me allowing him to document himself, like, with his physical, um, uh, you know,
Struggle.
limitations and struggles.
Mhm.
That in itself was, our agreement. That was the handshake. But I think for him to see it all, put together, I think it was a very emotional moment for him and his wife, and his family. So. For me, honestly, Lucy, when I saw his reaction, for me personally, that's all I needed. Because that's who I did it for. And that's why I committed to this project. And he represents the best version of ourselves and what we're capable of doing. I always tell people that, like, he's the best. He symbolizes the version of humanity, the best version of humanity. And especially during a time right now where a lot of the saturated narrative and content out there is division and that we're broken as a society. And although those things exist, my experience, at least in the 5 6 years, is that there are people from all over the world that will converge in one place, with a shared belief that they can actually save lives and help people. So that was my lens and perspective to humanity. So even though that there's a lot of bad shit that's happening in the world right now, it's not a blanket statement because there's actually a lot of good that's happening, and that's also the reason why I wanted to do this, which was, hey, listen, there are people that are doing incredible stuff.
There are
You
still
know,
good people in life. There are still many
there's still
heroes.
good
Yeah,
people.
there's still
There,
humanity.
there's still humanity, and even with these parents, and the people that I was able to meet. Um, this idea of um, valuing life or whatnot, was a really powerful thing to sort of be around and to be able to experience that. And so I think that's why that was one of the themes that obviously resilience, and that we can overcome anything in life. These parents, at least, that you had parents that were literally traveling thousands of miles just to receive cardiac care from Dr. Novick and his team. So, um, I think it was a really powerful experience, and obviously to witness that and to be able to be around that energy and to be around these parents. I do want to just tell this one real quick thing. When I was in Ukraine specifically, and listen, I know I mentioned Ukraine a lot because there was just a lot of things that happened, but we were in Congo, we were Dominican Republic of Congo, we were in Libya, we were in multiple different conflict zones. But in the documentary, there's the parent's child was born 5 days before my own son, and so it was kind of difficult to process that because when I came back, I told my wife that the only difference here was where our sons were born, and so like these guys literally had to um, they were displaced from their city. They literally had bullets flying past their heads, and then on top of that, they had to give birth in a basement of a hospital. And so, just the sheer amount of trauma that I'm pretty sure that they went through, it doesn't it just it keeps things in perspective. You know what I'm saying, Lucy?
Yeah.
So,
You never choose where you are born, and
yeah,
you
yeah,
have to deal
but
with it for the rest of your life.
right, right. And so I think, it's stuff like that that I was able to witness, right? It's like they really value that's what they care about. And so I think for me, like going into anything that I do now moving forward in my life, um, you can't really complain per se. You come back here and you feel like you're in a bubble.
Feel humbled. It's like,
You are like it humbles you to the max. And so I'm just grateful for that experience. And so yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Um, Definitely part of what I felt. I always feel appreciative and humbled every time I watch something like this. And if your dishwasher is not working, or you
Yeah,
know, some people
it's
don't
so
even
true.
have clean water to do anything with. So I feel thankful for all the tiny little things that we take them for granted in life. And speaking of that, uh, how do you want your San Francisco audience to feel walking out of this film? What is your message for them?
What do I want them to feel? Synesthesia, every emotion possible when they watch this film, honestly. But I think mainly hope that despite like all the shit that's happening in our world right now, that there is hope, that there are like what we just talked about, that there's individuals that are doing great work, that are team humanity, so to speak, and they're doing incredible things in this world. It's just, we obviously tend to gravitate towards the negative news, and it's difficult, right? Because it's everywhere. And but I think that's the main message, and resilience, because if there's anything that I've learned, whether it was through, the doctor's own challenges, and him almost dying in this process, I failed to mention that he still continues to strive forward. These parents, regardless of the situations that they've been through, whether it's the wars that are happening, whether it's the lack of cardiac care, that they would do anything for their child just to save them. And so I think ultimately that's the main message, is that whatever it is that we got going on in our lives, it's probably minuscule compared to what a lot of these people are going through in these parts of the world. And I think that if we just focus on what our higher calling, and just really tap into our higher consciousness and really focus on the positive and the good that we can do in this planet. I think that's how we turn the tide, and that's how we can make this world a better place. And you know visit this man's website, and I don't even need to sell this man, obviously, because the documentary itself, but just to learn about what they're doing. Um, and I think what we'll find is, because it is a character study with this doctor, um, that even though he's doing the highest calling of humanity, and he's doing incredible things going into these places, that we can find a piece of ourselves in this man. We really can. And
Awake the human in us.
the
Yeah.
human in us, you know what I'm saying? And so that's the main message. And and I really hope that the audience can really take that in and absorb that.
I'm sure the film will trigger a lot of emotions. It's a very emotional film, and it's not like in a bad way or in a sentimental way. It has pride in it. And but, of course, I feel that death for this doctor is not his own physical death. Is if he stops doing what he's doing. That's more dangerous than any disability or any physical challenge that he has. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for making the film continue making great films. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate you having me, and like I said, I'm looking forward to the festival. And if there's actually one last thing, because I know the attention is always on the filmmakers, but as everyone on your in your program will attest to, all the filmmakers, it takes a team, obviously, and it takes a village. There were just so many people that contributed to this film, from the administrative side to the creative side, and even in that, right? Like, that's what I wanted to do as a filmmaker, was how do I mirror Dr. Novik's sort of leadership in what he does, and sort of, utilize that sort of same energy into the people that I was sort of leading on this film project to bring it to its completion. So I just want to give them a shout out, because without them, this film wouldn't obviously be possible, and you wouldn't be able to feel the emotions that you're talking about when you watch this film, if it wasn't for them. So I just want to thank those guys.
Thank you, everyone that worked on the film. Definitely it takes a village or two to make this film. And you can tell, and you can tell the amount of effort and time. Thanks again, and Thank you for making it to the festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. We're so grateful and we're so happy, and we can't wait to share the this film to the world. Starting in San Francisco. So we're pumped.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Lucy.